Welcome to the first episode of Nrg TV, live on Facebook Watch.
I'm Valerie Wheeler today, and I'll be joined with
Patrick Hogan.
We will talk to Harry Ray, Director of Innovation and Training at Nrg Awareness, that celebrates 48 years in the heating industrial this year. Congratulations. And we'll be joined by Fianna Fáil Cork City Councillor and former Lord Mayor of Cork City, Ken O'Flynn. Ken, welcome.
Thank you.
And 25 years in the business as well, Richard Burke, founding partner of Burke on Energy Management, has worked in Ireland and of course the USA. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ken, can you give in 30 seconds something about yourself?
Absolutely not in 30 seconds. Hi, I'm Ken O'Flynn. I was elected in 2008. I've served 10 years on Cork City Council. In that time, I suppose, really my interest in energy has been both in local authority property and also in the private sector. I've noticed that there has been a huge uptake on grants throughout Ireland, but unfortunately not a lot of people know about grants, and I suppose that's really what I'm here to talk about today.
Thanks, Ken. Richie?
I'm in the business about 25 years, so I'm a heating contractor. I suppose we've seen from various changes from solid fuel stoves to oil boilers, gas boilers, heat pumps. There's a constant change, so there's a constant need for updating of trade skills and what have you, so that's where we're at.
Last but not least, Harry.
Well, as you say, I'm 48 years in the heating business, if I'm counting right. Well, I started in 1970. Served my time in Cork, went off to Australia and worked in a power station construction, and then came back, and I've been self-employed since. And then became involved with some innovations, designed some heating equipment, and moved on with my son David to form a company. And we eventually joined with Seabox and have now the company called Nrg Awareness, where we basically promote innovative heating systems and solutions, and the solutions being the operative word, as opposed to products where people haven't got gimmicky systems. They have something that really does create proper comfort and at an energy efficient and cost effective price.
It's, I suppose, something that not many people are knowledgeable about. It's why you're here today, for you to express more things like your grants, Ken, that you're on about. If you want to talk about grants first now, Patrick.
Yeah, so Ken, as you said earlier, not many people know about grants.
Well, that was the interesting thing, and I put something recently in my social media asking people about the grant system and have you availed of the grant, have you applied for a grant? And almost 95% of people didn't even know there was a grant available for energy grants. You know, a couple of people have had the insulation grant, and you know, but people have looked at grants. And I think one of the big problems here is A, we're not promoting it, but B, there's a situation as well at the expense of actually the grant, because the grant comes in at a certain fee, and it becomes very expensive for people. And the other problem then, when we talk about grant systems for people in social housing, you know, we have 8,500 to 9,000 in our housing stock in Cork City alone. I'll find that a number of people are living well below the average C. In fact, probably the D and F grade for energy grade in their homes. Yeah, and you know, unless we have an entire regeneration of a village grant or funding that comes down from central government, we never get those houses brought up to standard. The criteria that to meet government criteria for that, to bring a property up to a standard, the tenant has to vacate, whether it's via death or transfer or leaving the property or whatever, and then the property is brought up to a proper energy standard. And a lot of the difficulties that I see, in particular in the north side of the city, is you have properties that are built in the 1930s, such as Granabraher, Farnreed later, Knocknaheeny later in the 50s, 60s, things like that. You look at these properties and insulation wasn't a thing in the 50s, it certainly wasn't a thing in the 30s, and an awful lot of the properties are still standing like that, which is causing huge heat poverty throughout the city, both north and south. And I think that's a difficulty that we have. And of course there's people that are after buying these houses as well, and they're in the same situation because there's very little that they feel they can do. And you know, they've been looking at the grants, but some of these grants, and I don't mean to be offensive to government, or it's not, I'm not here as a politician to attack government policy, but a lot of these grants aren't relevant to a lot of people, and they're particularly out of the reach. And I suppose really what I'm here to do is to make people aware of grants, but also I think listening to yourselves and meeting with yourselves prior, there are other things that you can do, and Harry touched on a very important word there, which was comfort. It's not about heating your house and boiling, it's about being comfortable in your home. A lot of people aren't like that at the moment.
Harry, can you explain? Sorry.
A lot of people will consider a heating system to be something that brings you from cold to hot. Well, that's where the money is wasted, because you don't want to be hot. You simply want to be comfortable. And if you only put in enough equipment, for example, boilers and radiators or underfloor systems, and you don't control it, you're going to go from one extreme to the other. And one is as bad as the other, health-wise, wasting money-wise. So really, what we're delighted to be involved with that is the advent of change. And companies like Burcon have picked up the gauntlet long ago and have learned how to install systems efficiently, what combination of products suits best. And it's all very fine to have money available through a grant, or if you have new products on the market that are extremely energy efficient. But if you haven't got the knowledge to know which ones and how you put them together, they're wasted. The grants are wasted. So really, this is where the companies like Burcon come in and make a difference, because they have the level of interest that really is needed.
Most properties would be open to some form of grant, whether it be a heat pump or gas or oil boiler or whatever, but it would be prior to when the house was built, either pre-2011 or pre-2006. But some end users to get the benefit of the grant might actually cost an awful lot of money to bring it up to the certain code that it needs to be to access the grant. So again, it would depend on end user, and it would vary from house to house, because not every house is the same, you know.
But that money wouldn't be wasted either, because it's bringing the house and comfort up. It's lessening the amount of energy. So yes, the grant will insist that you spend a certain amount, but it's not negative money. It's extremely positive money.
But for a lot of people out there, certainly in my constituency, it's not possible. It's not affordable to go out there. And you know, I think if you look at mainland Europe and you look at even the United Kingdom, grants are an awful lot cheaper and they're a lot more accessible for people. Yes. There's a lot of people out there that, you know, have to spend 7 or 8, maybe 20,000 on solar paneling and this, and you know, yes, that's where the big problem is I see on the ground. Yep. You know, and I don't know how do we address that. I think that probably have to change the system. But
you mentioned that there was a criteria, and like, is that the biggest issue, that the criteria just isn't feasible for some people?
There's that. There's knowledge about it. It just amazed me how many the feedback that I got this week on social media, people that didn't even know that there was a grant available to them, and that how do they access it and how do they apply for it. That's negligence on both city councils and local authorities and government. But I think there is the question then when you do go for the grant, it's kind of an all or nothing situation. Yes. Where it's changing everything in your property. I suppose
what we find with the grants as well is that there's a couple of granting systems out there, and people are only just becoming aware now that there's an SEAI grant, which they're classing, as we say, the government grant. But what's available out there as well, and people are not aware of it all, is what we call the carbon credit grant, which the utilities company would add something, a certain percentage to the utility bill as a credit, what have you. But a lot of people are not aware of that.
Richie, as well, let's say just taking one grant, the heat pump grant, can everyone get that?
Provided the house is 2011, yes.
And the process of it, so you have to get a technical advisor, which is a BER person out. If they get the technical advisor out, will their house pass?
No, not necessarily. And when people would ring us up on a daily basis asking about a heat pump, and we, I suppose, financially we can't get involved with that decision until we have the BER technical assessor that will go up beforehand and would assess the house and would say that it would need X amount of reworks to bring it up to the certain standard needed for the grant. So
the advisement on it would say that you need to get another 150 mil of insulation around your house.
Yeah, it could be thermal wrap on the outside. It could be putting the beads into the cavity and attic insulation, what have you. Even so far as that, some of the radiators might need to be changed in the house, what have you, but not necessarily. The heat load calculation would have to be done to every individual room to see that it's viable. Otherwise, you would have to change the heat emitter in certain rooms, you know, to accommodate.
To say that there are different grants available. For example, there's a grant for a heat pump, there's a grant for controls, there's a grant for installation. So you're not lumbered with a massive fee and then you get an insignificant grant. It actually is a very viable and a very good idea from government, but it's how it's applied. And I really think that, for instance, our attitude would be like how do you eat an elephant, a bite at a time. We structure the system so that at least if you put in a system, a part of the system you can afford, that when you're adding later, when you can afford the rest, that it fits into an overall plan, and that ultimately your savings that you're going to make from the first part will pay for the second part.
I have to say, Harry, and I'm not contradicting you, the problem is that a lot of people are out there and they're under the illusion, or they're being sold the entire package, that you have to draw down the grants for everything, and people are out there, plumbers and different businesses, that are saying, you know, you have to have this, that, and the other, you know, for your heating system to be corrected.
But logic will dictate that if you, for example, if you put in a super efficient boiler onto reasonable radiators, and you put into a house that's not insulated, you've just wasted your money. So you have to, first of all, you have to fix the fabric of the house, which is going to be a major benefit in any case. And then you can logically put in a system that uses less energy, costs less to run, and still be more comfortable. But there has to be a strategy. Yeah. And it's that strategy that plumbers are finding difficult to try to put across, because again, you must understand, it's a whole new area of learning for plumbers, because now they're becoming energy advisors. They've been, up to now, they had to do carpentry, part of their job, wiring, building work. Plumbing is a very complex job because you have so many different things. But now we're coming into the realms of having to know the mathematics of construction. So, to my mind, as I say, there is great need for more explanatory documentation from the government. And also there's better need for the people all involved, the architects, the builders, the engineers, the plumbers and electricians, that they need to understand how each of these how each trade cooperates with the next. So in energy awareness just now, we're very far into developing a CPD course that'll be attended by all the different members of the trade, with the whole idea of uniting the language, so that if a plumber is going to address what a builder should know or should have done, he'll understand, and he can express it to the builder. Vice versa, the builder will know, and the architect will know what the plumber, generally speaking, what the plumber is trying to do. So when you have a sort of a cohesive team, it will make the whole job easier. But without that cohesion, you've got a lot of different players that might not work in unison. And really, energy awareness comes from that point, that we tie the whole team together. We act as a kind of a middleman with regard to information. And then if plumbers do need advice, we'd offer that. With the like of work, and they're gone beyond our level because they already know what we would want them to know. But there are many, many other people out there who would greatly value that extra bit of information that'll help them to get involved in the whole game, you know. Even for myself in my own house, I suppose my biggest question is, how do I bring you see the gas bill or the electricity bill coming in, you're thinking about putting the nail in the letterbox.
And usually people are, it would be the on and off scenario, you know what I mean? Off when I'm hot and on when I'm cold, you know. But again, that would send the heating curve of the boiler up and down so dramatically that you would consume a lot of gas heating a building that way, instead of putting in the proper controls. Even controls on their own will set up the building to a certain comfort. But as Harry said, you have to keep the heat inside the building. There's no point producing the heat into the building if it can't keep it in. You have to create the flask effect inside the building, whatever the cost is. It could be a high cost, it could be a low cost. It will depend on individual buildings on their own, you know.
That's what people are afraid of, though, the cost. You're dead right, Ken. But Harry, you mentioned the language. Not a lot of people know that language either, even the consumers. So maybe it's something that you need to fill the consumers in as well, because if I hear I need this big crazy grant, I'd be too afraid to go get it because of cost.
Well, I'll give you an idea of the language now. You're talking about, people have the impression that you have single rads or double rads, as if they would use more energy if they're double or single. But actually a radiator has a certain output. But if you take a radiator in an average living room, and just suppose it's 2 kilowatts, if you convert that to bulbs, at 100-watt old bulbs, that's 20 old 100-watt bulbs. So if you leave one radiator on, you think nothing of it. But you come into your house and there's 20 bulbs switched on, suddenly you learn the language. You know?
But that's a very fair point.
Yeah, when you put it into that logic, it makes sense. So we're going to talk about the 2020 targets. These targets, are they achievable? Can we achieve them by 2020? And there is a really big fine, close enough to €1 billion a year for Ireland to be fined if we don't hit these targets. So, Richie, just coming to you on our renewable electricity targets. In electricity, I know you do electrics with plumbing, but in the sense of the targets we have to meet, a drop of 16%, is that achievable in Ireland?
I don't think so, but the way things are going at the moment, especially, I suppose I'm being rebranded from being a plumber or a heating contractor, or where I'm being called a renewable installer now, which has a title of heat pump, PV, solar terminal, the old wood pellet, which was knocking about on the grants a couple of years ago, which has since dropped out. But I suppose going forward, since a lot of the building regs have changed now to suit the new buildings coming online, and heat pumps are being introduced at a huge rate at this stage. I suppose where I would be looking at it is if you bring all these new units online, especially with people buying electric cars and what have you, will the grid be able to manage this load at some point going forward? It's something to be looked at. It was mentioned a couple of months ago when these units come online. Will the load be there to justify all these units going in? Personally, there might be an issue going forward. You know.
Okay. And Ken, just on transport. Can we meet our targets of 10% of our transport demand in a renewable source? Take Cork, for example.
Well, I don't believe we can at this point. We're kind of we're a bit like the guy that did nothing all year and all of a sudden we're cramming for the exams the night before. And that's where we are at the moment with that. Now, we have X amount of docking stations in Cork City and around the country for electric cars. But this type of target to move us to this level, there's questions about it, okay? The big question is, if I'm travelling to Dublin, I need to stop and recharge my electric car 3 times before that doesn't make sense. Especially in this kind of age where everything is instant and we want to be there in seconds rather than hours or days, that doesn't make sense. The other question is these docking bays cost about 6,500 to 7,000 to install. There's certainly not enough around the city. We're giving them away free at the moment, subsidising them. That can't continue. That can't go on. I think the government, if they really want to address this issue and in the transport issue, about 2 budgets ago was this time to start. There certainly hasn't been given to the motor industry enough incentives for electric cars. There certainly hasn't been given enough incentives to local authorities to install these docking stations. And who's going to pay for all of this? Like the idea is that we'll have a docking station outside all of our homes someday and we'll be able to plug in the car overnight and off we go. In that case, bear in mind, electricity bills in this country are the most expensive in Europe. So I certainly wouldn't be going away getting an electric car when my ESB bill is going to be sky high, and it's the dearest in Europe. So when we talk about renewable energy and we talk about clean energy in Ireland, I think we look at this in a very fanciful way, but we're not serious about it. And we haven't gotten serious about it. And we certainly haven't taken the initiatives. And I believe that we are going to have to pay some significant fines, or we're going to have to go back to Europe and say, lads, we've been very naughty, but we will get our house in order. And I don't think that's going to wash. And I think there's some serious questions for the civil service in particular, who should have been driving this, who should have been seeing this coming in from Europe for the last 10 years.
Those are targets, I suppose, for transport and electricity. Another target by 2020 is the heat. The heat sector is the largest user of energy in Ireland, and we are committed to ensure that by 2020, 12% will come from renewable sources. Is that achievable, or is it ever achievable, Harry?
I think it's extremely achievable, and I have a very simple reason for saying so. We now know what's wrong. All we have to do is address it. We know that houses are losing heat. We know that installers need to have their skills upgraded. It's unfair that installers have to pay for their skills to be upgraded to achieve a national target, which is such a huge amount of money. Surely to God, the trade should be subsidised to bring their levels up. I also think there should be incentives for installers who will actually take advantage of the opportunities and move on, and show that by the quality of their work, the quality of their understanding, and by the application of their skills, that they get some reward system back. And I think it's only by incentivising the trade, in as much as the customer is incentivised with grants, but the guys carrying the lot, no, it's not the government officials, and it's certainly not the merchants and manufacturers, it's the lowly plumber. So if you take that it's possible to put in much smaller boilers into well-insulated houses and control it properly, and if you did have the right level of skill and the right understanding, and it was monitored and supported properly, I think that we would leave that target of 16% for dead. In fact, I can say to you that from absolute experience, I'll put it this way, just now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock. Right, we take a hotel in your own mind. Don't tell me the name of the hotel. How many people in that hotel now are having baths? Probably none. For the last 4 hours, probably none. And yet the same boilers have been heating the same water and pushing it around the same hotels, and all that energy has been wasted and nobody's addressing it. So we're firing money down the drain. If there was only someone to stop and think for a while and say, let's take the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit is the obvious energy wastage, and also you can have all the incentives you want money-wise for customers, but if the plumber isn't assisted to go in and do his job properly and showing exactly what he can achieve and then rewarded for doing it, you can't really go anywhere. But it's the same in every walk of life. The guy carrying the can must be lifted up the highest. The guy who's going to be doing the most work must be helped. So I think that if we keep going to where we're going, I would agree, there's not a hope in hell. But if we actually cop on and apply our God-given intelligence properly, we're going to achieve it no problem.
It's the only achievable one, so, because the other two you don't seem to think it is.
Not at the moment. No. But Harry touched on something that was very interesting there to me. And it was, you said about training people and having to bring themselves up to a level.
Yes.
But what do you mean by that?
You see, most people will think that a plumber's job is joining pipes together, fill it with water, put wire onto a boiler, turn on, it heats the water, and so the rads are hot. That's your heating system. But it isn't. A heating system generates comfort. Anything beyond comfort is waste. Anything less than comfort is not an adequate job. Okay. So it's fair to say that a plumber will be led by the industry to think, just put in whatever boiler. He's being competitive with someone else, so he can't put in the best because he won't get the job, because the customer doesn't understand that if you don't pay for proper work, you're not going to get proper work. And so there's two prices involved in the heating system. There's the installation cost, there's the running cost. The running cost leaves the installation cost for dead, right? But the emphasis is always on installation cost. It should be on running cost. And another thing is that different systems should be vetted by a central government agency, so that if a particular product has an ability to save better energy than another one, that should be pushed, so that then manufacturers will up their game. But just now, it's a toss of a coin. If you're unlucky enough to get the wrong installer who uses the wrong equipment, and he's really neat work, you think you've got a great system, but you haven't. And if you get a guy who bashes in a system and uses the right gear, and technically it's doing the right things, you might have a great system. But there's no one who actually knows how to define the difference. I'm saying to you, we need more understanding and a promotion of that understanding at a much more basic level that average people can understand. And with that behind you, you can achieve any target. And I'm going to tell you, I'd make a prediction. I reckon we could easily be up around 35, maybe even 40% energy savings, because we've done it. Energy awareness has done it many times. So I'm not speaking off the cuff. We have actually physically done it.
So you think, Harry, that we could beat the complete target by doing what you said there?
If the right people, the right players, either people who can't do their job get out of the way and let right people in, or else the people in there who have the responsibility take responsibility and actually go about achieving it.
You see a trade-led.
The trade is incredibly important, but it has to be led where the trade are brought on. The trade, it's not fair for independent plumbing contractors to carry a national responsibility like this. This is something that has to happen at a political level and be filtered down as quickly as possible to the grassroots. It's like saying you can have all the knowledge you want in your head, but it must get down past your shoulders and into your hands. And the plumbers and the electricians and the installers of installation, they're the guys actually doing it, but they're the ones who must be helped the most. If they're helped and incentivized, then the target is extremely achievable.
But there's no incentives out there for plumbers?
No.
None whatsoever?
Absolutely none.
To upgrade themselves? Or
None.
As time was going on, like we have RGI, which looks after all the gas installers domestically, shall we say, at the moment, which is fine. We have to go for a reassessment every 5 years, which is fine. I have no problem doing that because it'll bring my skill level in the gas industry up a notch. If there's issues or updates in there that I didn't know about, I'll be made aware at that stage. I should know them anyway because updates are constantly coming. But on the gas side of it, we do have the RGI that do feed into us. We talk to them, they talk to us, which is great, you know. But as in from the trade point of view, as Harry was saying, as in regards of association or anything like that out there where the trade is put as one, there is nothing. There is absolutely nothing. Like you have over in England, you need a ticket to a trade ticket to put in a hot water cylinder. You need a trade ticket to put in a boil, an oil boiler, a gas boiler, a solid fuel boiler, solar thermal, so on. There is certain aspects of that here, but a lot of it is falling by the wayside because there's no trade association here in the first place. You have to go around and talk to the individual plumber. The individual plumber won't talk to the next plumber, and so on. Everyone does their own thing.
So really, everybody loses. Yep. Whereas the coordination is the missing ingredient, and that coordination, which should be led by the people who are going to physically write the check for the billion euros. Instead of writing a check for €1 billion, why don't they take a fraction of that money and help the installers to come up and then promote the good installers to get more work and better work, and then monitor the standards of energy saving and look at what equipment is providing it, and suddenly you're on a win-win situation. Everybody wins. The government wins, the taxpayer wins, the people making the good equipment wins, the installer wins, the customer wins. How could you lose?
Just touching something on the budget recently, I think we all expected carbon taxes to increase. They need to go up. I'm guessing this is a question for all of you, really. Carbon taxes, they're in around €30 right now. They will increase over the next couple of years to €80 a tonne. Do you agree on it?
I certainly wouldn't agree because, like, why would you? First of all, you didn't put the system in place that would cause people to save energy, and then you're charging the people because of your failures. To my mind, there's something, it has to be on a positive spin, not taxing is a negative spin.
Exactly. I'll take off my hat and you can go for election the next time. I'm retiring and I put this guy up. but it's true because there's not incentives out there. We have a government, and again this isn't political, but we have governments, successive governments, my own party involved a whole lot, who have pushed people into fuel poverty, and we're wasting money on the fuel allowance every year. For people, and I say that now in a very flippant way, wasting, but and I'd much prefer to see a group of incentives been out there for people. Wouldn't it be great if we did have incentives like that? And what you said, it makes perfect sense. And helping those in the trade, but yeah, carbon tax is a punishment. It's a punishment, and you're quite right. I don't mind punishing people for doing something that they shouldn't be doing. But if there's not an alternative out there for them.
There's another level that you have to look at as well, is that not everyone can afford the new incentives we have. So people will be there and will have to use oil, will have to use gas because they can't upgrade. They don't have the funding to upgrade and have it. So they will be stuck in that rut, which means they'll be penalised even more. You know what I mean? So the circle keeps going around.
And these are people in particular that built the houses in kind of the 50s, 60s, the one-off kind of.
Exactly, and it was an old system which kind of turned on the time clock and everything heated together. So the way things are going now with the zoning and what have you, where you can section off different parts of the house and the water and what have you, sometimes it's very unachievable to get a house up to that level because the disruption that might be involved might be too much, and second of all, the funding that might be needed to bring it up to that level might be too much for them to accomplish, Yeah.
Going to have a quick chat about district heating. Ken, I know you did an article in the Evening Echo about and the Irish Examiner. Get the plug in.
Got the plug for all the Cork papers.
But you're on about the district heating.
Yeah, we've had problems with district heating in Mayfield, in various parts actually of the north side. And I suspect it's because we're buying in cheap equipment, or we're buying in the wrong equipment, or it's being installed wrong. But we've had tremendous problems with it. And I suppose, Harry, you know more about that. My experience of this type of heating hasn't worked for us in Cork City Council, or hasn't worked in Cork County Council either, from what I'm working out. I don't know why it is. We're being told that parts are impossible to get. You have to ship them in from Denmark, and you have to get them from this place, and I thought they all came from China at this stage. But anyway, maybe I'm wrong. But no, district heating for me has been a disaster, and trying to get people reconnected again, and you know, people 3-4 weeks without heating in the middle of the winter, you know, and you're talking a lot of elderly people as well.
But there's actually no need. There's no need for that situation, because again, I'll have to tell you that common sense isn't prevailing. There are very large, very profitable companies who have cornered the market in selling district heating systems, and everyone has the impression that they're the only ones to go to.
But are we buying cheap, and are we buying expensive?
Overspending, and as well as that, buying stuff that purposely made, to my mind, in some respects, where only these so-called experts come in and fix it. Whereas if you think of district heating in the simplest sense, you have a boiler house or numerous boiler houses that feed onto pipework that pass down the street and pass into different premises, and then you're extracting heat from that. There's nothing really, really complicated. But what actually happens is they put in so much, let's call it technology, but actually to my mind it's just a profit-making racket that's actually taking way too much to install, way too much to manage. And really, there are many, many ways that I would see that you could do it at an awful lot cheaper and an awful lot more cost effective. And I know I have one example to mind where we designed apartments and there was central heat pumps on a roof situation feeding all the apartments. But in a given apartment, if a person wanted to have a solid fuel boiler or a gas boiler, they could heat their own apartment even though they have heat coming in. And at the same time, if they had surplus heat, it was possible to put that heat back out into the central system. Well, that's so doable. But whereas just now we have, like, if they're putting in things that just rely on everything working all the time, where to my mind, you're building, you're creating a monster, creating a problem. It takes one component to fail, the whole thing is down. There are much cheaper, much better, much faster ways of installing.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I certainly know of one building in Cork which was a former hotel on the Quays and was converted into apartments back in the late 90s, maybe 2000 sort of thing. But the building couldn't be sold for a very long time because the heating system was an internal group heating system, and nobody can control it. And that was the problems that we've had, and many local authorities have had, not just in Cork but throughout the country, that they've had these heating systems where, you know, there was one person controlling the heat for the entire block.
Well, do you know who they should have asked? Instead of the experts, plumbers. A plumber will know the answer to basic circulation problems. The last person that are ever asked are the people on the ground. And what I'm saying is, sometimes the so-called experts are the kings with no clothes. They're the wrong guys in the wrong place who believe the wrong things, if you understand me. To my mind, there's absolute plenty expertise, but it's not being captured or capitalized on by having a proper coordinated thing where people can put their expertise in. Whereas, I say, going back again to the award system, someone who shines because they have good skills will rise to the top and will be able to do work. Whereas just now, certainly in designing systems, we're being led and said by people, multinational groups who sell massive equipment at huge expense, and we forget to point the finger. And why isn't it working? It's their fault.
But even going back to what Ken said there a while ago about, I've been called into one of those, one of two of those units above there on a user basis, and I went up there and had a look, and basically the unit inside the household, shall we say, wasn't talking to the central unit at all. You know what I mean? So
it's just not a connection. It's a connection problem, is it?
There was no communication. So no matter what I could do, I could not get the heat into the house. So it was a problem from communication from the individual house to the central unit. You know what I mean? So, but the central unit was turning off, and no matter who was looking for heat, the central unit wouldn't come back on. So it was circulating around cold water. You know what I mean? So it was absolutely.
But is that a case of just bad insulation? So or bad?
I wouldn't say insulation. I would say the control strategy of the whole thing. It just wasn't thought out from A, B, right to Z.
And also back up. What happens if? If someone's in the house and they have no heat, they should be able to go and say, well, plan B. But there's never a plan B, so everyone freezes. But plan B could be a very, very simple thing. It could be an electric immersion that could be on the system that might cost more, but then that could be subsidised by government or by the council until the system is up and running. Perhaps that's not a good idea. I'm just giving you off tip of the tongue. But it just seems to me that if it was my choice and if I was designing a large complex, I'd have no doubt we'd have district heating. None whatsoever, but it would be done properly.
But Harry, like my understanding of district heating is that it should be profitable for the owner, let's say Cork City Council or a builder. This sounds to me it's not profitable at all currently, and it doesn't work.
Obviously, maintenance costs are going to take a very, very sharp cut into profits and probably destroy profits.
Yeah, well, that's the reality of it. You know, we haven't. It hasn't been a benefit for us because, you know, we have tenants that are very upset, that are cold, that had to move out, that, you know, cost us money. There was legal cases. There was, you know, all these sorts of threats, and you can't blame people for that. You know, if you're paying a rent and you're a tenant and you're not being treated correctly by your landlord, whether it be a private or public sector. You know,
but vice versa, if you were a landlord and you had something that was costing you money, would you not change it, or would you not do something? But what we're doing is repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And if you don't learn from your mistakes,
you're bound to repeat them.
Yes.
But I suppose going back to that unit about centralisation, district heating, what have you. You look at even private estates, what have you. You look at 40, 50, 100, 200, 300 houses. All have their own individual heating units. All have to be serviced. All have to be maintained. You know what I mean? Which is great for me. You know, but if they were more centralised, it would basically they would have a unit inside, and it wouldn't have as many working parts. I wouldn't have to be maintained as often going forward. You know, so it's definitely the forward thinking on that. But whether it will happen, I can't see it. You know?
But from the installer point of view, Richie, like if you had banks of boilers and heat pumps in his box, let's say, right? Like something similar to what's behind us. Yes. That is easier to get into than 5 houses that people aren't home till 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
Of course, and besides having the central unit where you would have X amount of boilers or heat pumps or whatever the case may be, a heat source, shall we say. So there would be certain amount of maintenance involved in that, but usually any of those units that I was involved in the past would have a lot of remote access and what have you, so they'd actually know what's going wrong before it actually went wrong, you know what I mean? So a lot of that technology has come on leaps and bounds, certainly in the last 5 to 10 years, where this information is more accessible. You can even get down into the perimeters of boilers and what have you, you know. So it is a lot more advanced. But I suppose going back to if there was a central unit and there was individual houses out there that would take from the central unit, there would be a certain amount of maintenance within those individual units. Not much. It'd be pumps or whatever the case may be, which would last X amount of time. It wouldn't be ongoing yearly or 2 yearly or whatever the case may be, you know. So it would certainly cut down.
Patrick, can I just remind you that we've done quite a few hospitals, say, and in the hospital you cannot not have heat, you cannot not have hot water. So we would build in redundancy, and we'd also have a situation where we would, David now would say man the computer, and if it was an issue arose, we would sometimes be in a position to phone the hospital and say, you need to go to your boiler house and check the second pump, there seems to be something wrong. We've switched over to another one. The hospital wouldn't even know they had a problem, and we're telling them in advance because we're monitoring the system. We don't have to keep looking, the system will tell us if we have a problem. And so if we can do it in a hospital, and for years we've been doing it, and we have never ever had an issue where there was any serious lack of heat or lack of hot water, we would deal with it immediately. But the system is designed to deal with it immediately because we put in, so there's very few moving parts, and every part has a crucial role. And our objective is comfort, running costs, and functionality backup. Like, so what I'm saying, if all fails, there's something else to do. If you don't have that, and you're with elderly people in the top of a hill overlooking a city, and they suddenly have no heat Christmas Day, if you haven't built that in, who's at fault? Do you know? You have to think ahead. To my mind, it just needs a bit of radical thinking, and it certainly needs a bit of innovation. But most definitely, even if you look in what we're doing behind, we have 3 heat sources onto a manifold that collects the heat and distributes it out. Then we have another manifold over on the right-hand side that puts the heat somewhere else. So there, you could say, is a district heating system. In all the years we're using that manifold, we've never had a callback. So, you know, we're doing something right. and someone is doing something wrong, you know.
And again, just going on that note, Harry just said there, from an installer perspective, the majority of systems that we would put in would be a manifold type system. For the simple reason is it deals with a lot of the issues that you would have in general plumbing with a house, like neutral points and stuff like that. I'm not going to go into a too technical side of it, but it gets rid of the air, it gives you circulation. If you want heat in certain parts of the house, it will get there. There's a pump behind it. You're not relying on one pump to get all the way down, get past 20 rads to heat one rad down below. So there's all that end of it. So it does fix.
Whereas district heating uses age-old technology with valves that have to close, they have to send signals. That's in certain what we're finding, that's outdated technology, and yet it's being applied to this day in district heating systems.
Well, the idea for us, of course, to put in district heating system in city council or for any local authority is because there's a charge on, we're servicing boilers, and we've committed ourselves to service every boiler of maybe 9,500 to 8,500, and that's a huge expense to us, which we have to pass on to the tenant, which is a €2 charge per week, as you know. And that's why district heating was a good idea for us for first day. But district heating for us, possibly for what you're after outlining there, and I don't know who the suppliers were or any details like that, but it certainly for us hasn't worked out. Yeah. And if you're saying if it's a multinational problem, if it's a problem that the technology is there but it's not being applied correctly, or we're spending too much money on it, I don't know.
Well, there's too many fiddly bits and pieces involved with district heating that there's no need for. And if you cut back to basic plumbing, what an average plumber would understand, and then get proper, technically able, innovative people to put that together and cut out chaff, you're going to end up with a system just like any reasonable system will keep going.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest, just going on that note there, Harry, the biggest culprit we would find on a kind of a commercial industrial scale when we're going into certain applications, especially if find the third man in or the 10th man in after X amount of installers and what have you, there would be certain units and certain devices put in place that would prevent anyone else working on the system. You know what I mean? So again, it's locked down and it's honed into a certain manufacturer or certain supplier or whatever the case may be. So and then the cost will go up because for me to go forward, I have to take out that unit and put in something else that's more suitable that everyone has access to. So I would put something in that everyone has access to, where other people out there would home it in and would lock it down, as in it's their unit, no one else can access it. You know what I mean? So there's that element as well.
It goes back to what you were saying about having finding the most energy efficient units of everything.
And vet units, vet it. If it's going to be, if you're going to use it, check it against other things and basically invest in the R&D, not in the development of the products, but seeing, do the products do what they said, what's written on the tin? Yeah. Do you know? If you don't do that, how the hell can you know what to do?
I definitely think this conversation will continue for a very long time more. If you'd like to comment below any questions, episode 2 will be very, very soon. From Patrick and Valerie, see you soon.